Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
Greetings and welcome back to the Dripping Bucket Podcast with your hosts, Krystle Matar and me, where the fuck I am. Today we are joined by Andy Peloquin, the author of way too many fucking books for me to possibly list.
I've got one.
Dark Blade series. How many books is that?
8?
Dark Blade is 8, and then 9 is coming out later, but it'll be 15 in all.
Queen of Blades, Silent Champions. Holy fuck. Dude, you have a lot of books.
Yeah, I don't.
Lots.
Well, so I picked up Child of the Night Guild because I beta read for you something that was in the same universe. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's set right, or it's right before book 2, Thief of the Night Guild, the story. So I call it Queen of Thieves 1.75. My wife the other day, she was like, "What does that even mean? 1.75? That's wrong." I had to explain it to her, and she still didn't get it. But whatever.
It doesn't matter. It's bonus content, and I was just so impressed by how, like, I hadn't read your stuff before, so I wasn't familiar with any of it. And I was so impressed with how much of the world building you were able to impart on me in the budget of, like,
30,000 words.
Yeah, 30,000 words.
It was supposed to be a 15,000 word short story.
Only double, but still, like, that's a low budget for how much world building you pulled off. And it was dark and it was weird, like, and I mean that as a compliment. I mean that as a compliment. And I was like, I need more of this. What book do I buy? And you said Child of the Night Guild. I was like, deal.
It was definitely the weirdest thing that I've ever written. Like everything for me is very much like reality based. So all my stuff is fairly low magic. And this one was just like this was very dark horror fantasy.
Yeah, body horror.
And I was like, you know what? Let's lean into it and let's get weird.
Yeah. It worked. And so where are we expecting? This is the longest intro ever. Where are we expecting to see that double word count short story?
So it is going to be in an anthology that has not yet been announced. That should be coming. Yeah, official word will be disseminated, I believe, later this year.
Okay.
But what was cool is that I wrote the story as part of a Kickstarter campaign. One of the tiers was someone they backed at a higher tier to write a story, a heist novel with me. And this person who wanted to write it, he's this diehard reader. We did a video call, and I swear 50% of the books on his shelf were right behind me. And I was like, we were instantly best friends. And he was, we were just talking, just kind of kicking ideas back and forth. And he was telling me that he was buying a castle. He's German. In Germany, he was buying a castle, and he was having some trouble because the foundation was slipping and this whole thing was sliding into the river. And I was like, tell me everything. And this is where the story idea came from. She has to break into this castle or this mansion because it's sliding into the river, and her alchemist buddies are going to fix it. So she has one night to steal, stuff. And I was like, oh my God, anything else about the story I don't care about. This is now the story that we're telling. So it was like I basically pestered him for pictures and was asking him, what was going on. And it was just so cool how just one little tiny detail in a conversation sparked this whole idea.
That's incredible. And I really felt like it's interesting to know that was, because that setup was so good and so interesting, and then it led to some weird places, like we both said.
The truth is that I could never have come up with that idea on my own. Like, that is a degree of creativity that I do not possess, and I say this as someone who has written 46 books, right? But that is just like
thousands of books. Yeah,
I don't have any concept of architecture or engineering or anything, so it's like, your castle is slipping into the river? What even is this? It is a fantasy novel that in and of itself. So
Yeah.
I found that
Yeah.
that doing this thing through Kickstarter, I just finished, or I'm going to start working on a third story that I did for the Thief of the Night Guild, someone back to that tier again. And it is an origin story for two of the people that you meet in Child of the Night Guild. And I'm basically taking this guy's experiences as a security guard, as doing, like all of his sort of things that he's done in his life. And that's what's going to be the obstacle for these two young thieves. And I'm just like, tell me everything, every weird thing that's ever happened to you on the job. Tell me, and I'm going to figure out how to make it interesting and write it in. So it's very fascinating to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's like, when people ask us, where do you get your ideas from? It's like, literally anywhere. Fucking anywhere. Somebody will say a sentence and bam, a story. If we can ask and share.
I definitely don't know enough people who own castles, though.
Yeah.
Me neither. Just the one, but damn.
Just the one. More than us. 100% more than us.
He hasn't yet invited me, but I'm hoping.
Yeah. So you said 46 books published? Written?
Yeah.
No, I think it's 45 published, and then 46 I just finished writing it.
Okay. So what was your first book? When did you actually start? Let's go right back to the beginning.
Back to the beginning. I started writing in 2013.
Asshole.
I started writing in 2013. So I had written some little short story random thing when I was 19. And I was like, fuck, I love the writing. I love the creative aspect of it, but I didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And then I got into copywriting as a day job while I was teaching English in Mexico City. A whole story in and of itself.
As you do. As you do.
I lived in the south of Mexico City. This is the biggest city in the world, right? So I lived in the south, drove to the north, and then west, and then back home to south. My first class was at 7 a.m. and my last class ended at 7:30 p.m. So with, big city traffic, there's no way to come home.
That's all.
Yeah. So I had hours every day to do nothing. So I kind of stumbled into copywriting, and I did it during my off hours and stuff, and then it eventually became sort of my main job. So I was used to sitting down for 5-6 hours a day and just hammering out the words. I think I got my writing speed up to 92 correct words per minute when I was doing that. So right now I can do a 2,000 word chapter in an hour when it's flowing because of that fast writing speed and stuff.
Just the speed, yeah.
And that's definitely the reason that I can write as much as I do. But I was copywriting, and there is a certain soullessness to technical information that an artistic soul cannot thrive on. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. It was a freelance, so I'm going to do this for my entire life, supporting a family of 4 kids. There is no way that I want to spend the next 30 years writing, bullshit articles about, car mechanics in Houston, car mechanics in Austin. Just no, I'm not here for that. So I was like, I'm used to writing anyways. I'm going to write a self-help book. At 24, what kind of asshole has anything to say at 24, right? Other than
definitely 24-year-old man.
Exactly.
That's the guy.
This was before I knew that TikTok existed. So I was like, I didn't have a real platform to share the wisdom of a 24-year-old. But I was like, I'm going to write a book. I actually had this whole idea. So I was born in Japan, grew up reading Japanese history, loving the samurai. So it was going to be this thing called the samurai factor, just the coolest horse shit ever. Real life lessons related to the samurai values. Who even knows, right? At this point, it's been so long. But I sound like a huge douchebag, and I love it. But as I was,
I love how the self-help book doesn't even really have a self-help title. That there was a fantasy author trying to.
I know, it was
trying to emerge.
It was a cry for help from the author within. But right around that time, someone who a friend of mine who has a comic book publishing company,
Cool.
I reached out to her, said, hey, I wrote this thing when I was 19. It was a short story, real dark, and, you know, child sacrifices and demons and angels and just, you know, and I sent it to her. She was like, this is awesome. I want to publish it. So I was like, okay, it's been 5 years. I am a much wiser and more creative man than I was at 19. What can I write now?
Yep.
So I plotted out a graphic novel script based on very much like 300 meets The Chain of Dogs from Malazan. I had just read Malazan at the time.
Okay.
And I love this like desperate march to futility. And I was like, this is the story I'm writing. So I wrote this graphic novel script. It ended up being 13,000 words. I wrote it on a weekend trip to Vancouver to visit my brothers in Vancouver. I'm sitting at the airport for a few hours. So there you go. Put some words in. Recovering from too much alcohol the night before. There you go. There's a few more struggle words. And by the end of this trip, I had written 13,000 words and I had killed everybody terribly. And I was absolutely addicted. I could not get enough of this because it was just like the whole point of the story was I'm going to give you hope and then rip it away again and again as The Chain of Dogs and 300 does. Like they were so emotionally impactful to me as a reader and as a story lover that I was like, I am going to do this now. And so I did. And the graphic novel never got published, but let's hope you can edit that part out in post. It became the final novel in my Silent Champions series.
Oh, okay.
Where like I figured this out.
I remember when you were
I figured out when I was writing
this cover now when
when I was writing the Silent Champions, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to find a way to write it into my world. So in the first, like the main story, you hear about the last march of Ninth Company, and you hear about everybody dying, and it's just grim. So you know what's coming, and then you read the book. It's a companion novel that I call Book 6. And it's just dark and delightful. It was one of the 2 stories I've ever written that actually had me crying at the end of it.
Amazing. Yeah, and so that comic book script birthed the Grimdark.
Exactly.
Is what we're hearing. Basically.
Yeah, 100%. And then I had so much fun with that, so I was like, all right, I'm going to do another one, and I wrote the graphic novel script that became the origin of what is now Darkblade. Like that was the book that got me started.
Yep.
It began as a graphic novel. The person I pitched it to, she was like, we can't really do anything with it. It's not quite in line with what the comic book publishing house is. It's like, well, then I'm turning it into a novel.
Right. Yeah. And that's the one that you pitch as like, if you read, Brent Weeks' trilogy,
Night Angel.
But really like Durzo specifically. Yeah, that one. This is a novel for you. Yeah, and that's kind of like, that's probably how I got interested in your writing in general, because I too was really frustrated with the main character of that trilogy.
Tylar. Fuck that guy.
This episode is gonna I think this episode is gonna air immediately after I aired all of my beef with that trilogy. So so I guess I'm gonna have to buy Darkblade too, jerk.
So it was so weird because, like at the time, this was again early 2010s, right? This was before indie fantasy was a big thing. I had been like desperately searching for more stories in the vein of Lies of Loch Lamora. Like I stumbled on the audiobook. I was absolutely enthralled by just how dark the tone was. And I wanted more of that. Now, this is before I had access to the internet at large, essentially. So it was hard to find out about, Joe Abercrombie and all of the other like badass, R. Scott Bakker, the badasses of Grimdark. And it was even before Grimdark was really at its heyday.
At that point.
So I hadn't really.
I think that was about its heyday, wasn't it, Fletcher?
Sorry, 2010, kind of like the peak.
Yeah,
Grimdark,
I think
and then everything.
I think the awareness
by the
of
time
it
I
was
showed
less.
up, it was already sort of smelling and rotting.
I think so. One of the ones that came out kind of like at peak, Grimdark time. Well, this was like the tail end of Grimdark was the Ed McDonald's and Peter McLean's. This is 2017.
Yeah.
So kind of right around that same time. This is like Mark Lawrence had Prince of Thorns out, and I think maybe one more at the time, but there wasn't so much grimdark
Yeah,
beyond. Like Joe Abercrombie was the closest you get. And
yeah, or it was harder to find me because at that time, like I feel that I remember standing in chapters, so you can probably relate. Just kind of staring at all the shelves, going like, I want a vibe, and I don't know how to find it. And it was kind of a really frustrating time to be.
I was so sick.
Reader,
I was so sick of all the coming of age stories. You know, like John Flanagan's Ranger's Apprentice showed me how much fun sort of a character developing badassery could be, but then Assassin's Apprentice, just instant disappointment because, you know, 23-year-old, who has the time and brain power to really savor the complexity of a character like that? When it says assassin on the front, you're like, give me the stabby stuff.
Yeah, we're in for stabby.
And there was none. And then coming across Night Angel, Kylar, whiny as shit. But Durzo, I was like, good Lord, this man is at the peak of his abilities.
He's the guy.
I want this and nothing else. And I couldn't find anything. So I was like, fine, I'm writing it.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for the spite book. You know, the book that you write out of spite because you're not satisfied. And it's like, you respect the genre. You love the genre. You love it for even, you know, blazing the trail that you then get to walk on, but then at the same time there's like this, man, there's something missing for me and I need to just do it myself.
I remember that time that was the bookstores just dominated by the huge series. Like there'd be 50 like all the Star Wars books, all the Star Trek books. I guess that was post Dragonlance. I can't even remember.
Dragonlance was still like, I remember it like it had several shelves, and I remember being like, "I'm happy for you, but that's not my thing." And
you go into the fantasy section, and like half of it is basically Dragonlance
6
level
shelves of Tolkien
shit. And then you've got this little section of actual like fantasy books by
it was sad how small the fantasy section was where I was at. But it definitely gave me that drive to write kind of what I wanted to read. And it started out like my first beta readers, when they first read the first draft, they were like, oh no, this is not good. And I kind of, you know, dug deep, and they were like, no, your character is a total badass. There's just nothing beneath the surface, which is very much the Durzo character. Because Kylar's doing all the emotional growing. So I was like, okay, I understood what I wanted, but then what I needed was something different. And that kind of led to the rabbit hole of, you know, diving into assassins and serial killers and all that kind of stuff. And that was what really hooked me, was all that psychological and emotional stuff.
Yeah. And like, I want to be like, to be fair to you, like authors always offer that. You know, the first beta read, people told me it was not good, as if they're ashamed of it, as if it's not something we all go through. And like, if you had said my first beta reader went great and I didn't have to change anything, I think we would be like enemies for the rest of our lives. Like, I would be so mad at you. So you know, to all of you aspiring authors out there, especially those of you who are getting your first beta reads back and it's not going well, it's okay.
Actually awesome.
It's normal. You're fine.
It's amazing.
Yes, because
exactly. You get to figure out why it's not good. Figure out what's good, right? You did something right. You told this awesome story that kept you addicted for however many tens of thousands of words, and then you get to figure out what.
And it was good enough that they finished reading it.
That's a huge thing in and of itself. But, if a beta reader will actually read through the whole book, it means the book has the right bones, or it has the right pieces, and then it's just missing something. Because if they're like, honestly, I couldn't get through it, that's a problem.
That's exactly. And then you get to like really dig into like who you want to be and what you want to say, and you get to like work on some really cool skills that, you know, you didn't even think you were capable of when you were writing that first draft. So it is a really cool place to be. And then you will either end up like me, who publishes 1 or 2 books every decade or so, or you'll end up like Andy, who has a stack of books literally as tall as he is, and he is over 6 feet tall.
That's
or somewhere in between. That was cool.
I've never seen that before. All of them stacked like that. And I was like, what asshole has that much to say? Like, no.
The asshole who wanted to write a self-help book at 24.
That arrogance just has not gone away. It's just cleverly concealed beneath layers of niceness and a beard.
Creativity. Oh man. I'm still in awe of like 46 books and change, because I'm assuming there's some like short stories and stuff.
Yeah, it's insane. You're not allowed to call me prolific anymore. You gotta just keep that shit to yourself.
You've been downgraded to just average.
Right, like I got what 15 or 16 finished novels, like
in about the same amount of time, I think, or
maybe yes, like similar. Longer. I think I started in 2008. But right. I mean, that was one book from 2008 to 2013.
Yeah. I keep saying, like, every time somebody that I know has to think about how many books they've published and they can't quite remember exactly what, it's like goals. Like, that's me in probably more years than I want to talk about, but I need to be there so desperately.
Yeah,
being senile helps.
Yeah. I just gotta work on my memory.
You should try drinking more.
Drinking more. I like this. I'd love to hear the science. Actually, don't tell me the science behind it. The solution solves itself.
Let's test it out. Yeah, let's just test it out. We'll report back if we remember.
Yeah, it's really weird to kind of look back at everything, because a lot, you don't think about it. You just sit and you do the work, and then the work is done, and then you kind of look back and you're like, wow. So like during the big lockdown that happened, I think it was 21 or late 20 to 21, I wrote a book a month in my sci-fi series because there was nothing else to do. It was like everyone else was sitting around playing video games and home from work and binging Netflix, and I work from home, so I had no excuse. So I was like, fuck. So I have to work, and I wrote these books because number one, they're 100,000 words. Like that's easy. But then it was just those sci-fi books. I think the longest is like 120 because you can't go long with, and I do mean standard sci-fi, not like the the Red Rising or the Empire of Silence. That's a whole different style of sci-fi. But this was just like real character-focused, action-adventure-y, cyberpunk-y, not quite space opera, but close enough. And it ended up being so fun because every story was totally different. It was basically, I sat down and I knew what this character was. He's a former special ops sniper who got paralyzed by a grenade, so he's got like an AI-controlled suit of armor, like Iron Man style kind of thing. So I was like, all right, he's a spec ops versus spec ops. He's a sniper versus sniper. He's AI controlled, AI versus AI. I basically made this list of 12 matchups that I wanted to have to play around with things, because I've never read sniper versus sniper in any book. There's Ghost in the Shell, the one episode, there is Enemy at the Gates, but you don't really get the real complex information that is a sniper versus sniper battle. It is fascinating. So doing things like that, it was like setting up entire stories just for these one or two little scenes where it's like, okay, two AIs are going to war with each other. How does one succeed where the other one fails? Or, how do two special ops soldiers face a problem the same and differently, and who comes out ahead based on, tiny details? That for me was what really compelled that story to come out of me, more so than any big emotional arc like Darkblade. But I still think that the Cerberus series has been the most interesting because you get to do all kinds, and it's sci-fi. Yeah, it's great. I got to play with every single kind of character that I wanted to, and more than I had to learn aerial combat, and I am not good at that. I tried to, like a flight simulator, and I was bad.
Right.
My brain thinks like this and like this, but not you know, like just the idea of trying to write a space battle, you know, where you've got like, you know, like watching Star Wars and everything comes, you know, very linearly, and I'm like, no, that's wrong. I couldn't even begin to wrap my mind around that.
Around the accent, yeah. One of these days we'll have to do like a compilation episode of like all of the weirdest shit that authors have practiced or researched.
Hell yeah.
For books, because like the hyper focus,
it really does. The rabbit holes are delightful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Hours of research for a single sentence about a candle.
I know. I'm reading Empire of Silence, or the Sun Eater series right now, and these words that he adds are just amazing. Like, how the fuck does he know this very specific word? Like the name of a garment worn by a very specific religious order that probably existed at like one point in history. And has never been, you know, you'll never see it anywhere. How does he know this stuff? What kind of, where is he going to research this? I need access to that, because it's like, I want my writing to sound that smart too.
His browser history. His browser history must be fascinating.
It's delightful.
Yeah. All right. So we are hitting the 26 minute mark. This is a lovely spot for us to wrap up. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. And we will be back next week or some other week. Who the fuck knows what the schedule is?
Next year.
With Andy again to talk about something else.
Thanks so much for coming by, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for us.
Yeah, cheers.